Thank you. Thank you, Beth, for your very kind introduction and promise for a future sight. Good morning. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to thank the Attorney General and the Secretary of Education and the representatives from Health and Human Services for coming together and really pointing out the choice that we have. They represent the choice. We can educate the next generation today, or we can incarcerate the generation tomorrow. That's a choice that we have, and I commend the cities that have joined the forum today. Your dedication to a comprehensive approach to the problem of youth violence is one that should be replicated all over the country. We know what works in reducing youth violence. When it comes to areas of public policy, we know what works. Unfortunately, isn't always politically expedient, what polls well, or what has a catchy soundbite. We know that in Congress for too long we've followed the political slogans and sound bites. We have come up with slogans like tough on crime, 3 strikes and you're out, mandatory minimum sentences, abolish parole, or if you can get it to rhyme, it's even better. If you do the adult crime, you do the adult time. All of those have been studied, do very little, if anything, to reduce crime. Actually, a couple of them actually increase crime. But they have loaded up the prisons to the point where we lock up a higher portion of our population than any country on earth by far. And if we just put a little bit of that money out of what the Children's Defense Fund calls the cradle-to-prison pipeline into a cradle-to-college and career pipeline, we know that we could save money, but it takes an effort, it takes some commitment, and it takes making the right choice. That right choice is obviously a continuum of services starting very early. I say real early, teen pregnancy prevention to reduce the number of children born into dysfunctional families. Prenatal care could reduce mental retardation and learning disabilities. Nurse visits right after birth have been studied, significantly reduce child abuse, which is highly correlated with future crime. Early childhood education to make sure the children can read by the 3rd grade. They tell us that up to the 3rd grade you learn to read. After the 3rd grade you read to learn. If you can't read by the 3rd grade, you're not learning by the 3rd grade, you're on the way to dropping out, which is highly, again, correlated with future crime. After-school programs and constructive things to do with your time, and access to college. We need to make sure that people growing up see their older brothers and sisters and neighbors going to college and higher education. If they see that they're not going, then they can kind of figure out they're not going either. And that has a devastating impact on their ability to stay up late at night and do all the studying and make the sacrifices. But we know that if we can end the cradle-to-prison pipeline and create that cradle-to-college and career pipeline. I've introduced the Youth Promise Act, which follows pretty much what many of you are doing today. It's more of a process, really, than a program. The process is you get the community together. You figure out how much money are you spending on prisons and teen pregnancy, because you know if you have a good crime reduction program, you're going to reduce teen pregnancy and a lot of other social pathology. What are you spending on it today? A lot of communities will be absolutely embarrassed because in very high crime areas they may be spending more on social pathology, incarceration, teen pregnancy and other kinds of problems than the spending on the school board budget. And so put that number on the middle of the table, because if you're going to come up with a plan that's going to reduce that in half, then you shouldn't limit your if you got $100 million wasted in counterproductive incarceration, you need to make sure that you come up with programs that can do something about it, and you're not limiting your imagination to little programs that may help a few. You need to have a comprehensive evidence-based program. And when you come up with that plan, evidence-based, and we put that in the bill, you said evidence-based as opposed to what? As opposed to the slogans and sound bites that you'd be funding if you didn't put that in the bill, come up with an evidence-based plan to do something about it. Then as you implement the plan, study it to make sure it's working, And then, as people save money, get them to chip back in so that the programs can be funded in the future. We'll help fund the program once, but after that, the savings ought to be enough so that you can continue the program in the future. But that's the kind of approach that can significantly reduce crime and save money in the process. And we know that the prevention and early intervention approach is the way to go. The Attorney General mentioned a report on children exposed to violence. They're much more likely to be victims or perpetrators of violence in the future. The solution in that report was to actually reduce violence, and they had a lot of things you could do to reduce violence. The interesting thing about that report is it mentioned the criminal justice system twice. One, you're trying too many children as adults, and you ought to stop that. And two, zero tolerance ought to come to an end. The entire report was prevention and early intervention, counseling and things like that, and not the criminal justice system, because the Attorney General's reports concluded, or at least inferred, that the criminal justice system is not an effective way to reduce violence. It can respond to violence, but it cannot actually reduce violence. So we need to work together to make sure that we're actually reducing violence. I want to thank you for making the right choice to follow the evidence to actually reduce violence rather than to play politics. You are actually doing what works and proving that prevention is the right strategy to use. And for that, I want to thank you, and I advise you to keep up the good work, because the next generation is counting on your good work. Thank you very much.